Welcome to a new edition of the Neon Jazz interview series with jazz organist, pianist, composer, and bandleader Alexander Hawkins. We caught up with him on May 9th, 2020 to talk about the emerging COVID-19 lockdown world. He opened up about his latest 2020 CD, Shards and Constellations, and his life in music. He is a largely self-taught improviser working in a vast array of creative contexts. His distinctive sound world is forged through the search to reconcile both his love of free improvisation and profound fascination with composition and structure. He has a great story. Enjoy. Well, thank you for taking a minute. I think I want to start off here and ask, around mid-March, I know in the States this started happening. Talk to me about kind of timeline when you started realizing, wow, the world's getting ready to shut down and live jazz will be a part of that shift.
For me, it would first have come about. I first began thinking this might be an issue actually because I had some concerts in Italy in early February. I got back home just after things were really got bad in Italy. But I had to check out, I had to check out where I'd been because of the quarantine regulations. And that made me think, actually, this is serious. And the first work I lost, I was due to be on tour in Norway. I think it was maybe the 13th, 14th of March were the first concerts, and they were cancelled at a day's notice, in fact. And that's where it became clear that stuff was serious. And subsequently, I've lost absolutely everything. As has everyone, of course. But yeah, so I would say early March were the first cancelled concerts.
Yeah, I kind of have a ceremoniously framed piece on my desk here. I happen to actually see Dexter Gordon's wife, Maxine, talk about the book Sophisticated Giant. And I knew that day, it was at a community college here, I got her to sign the book, and it was March 12th, and I have it framed. I'm looking at it, and it's like I had no idea what was going to happen, how the world was going to change. Right. And that was the last anointed jazz act in person that I was a part of.
Right, right.
It was cool. Wow. It was a great speech, but I knew that day, I was like, this is something I really need to go to because everything's going to be over with for a while.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and I don't know that we knew the magnitude of it, but I think probably everyone had some inclination that things were going to hit a new level. So
absolutely, and I think I get the sense that we're still discovering the magnitude day by day. I think when it all happened, I assumed that I'd lose everything until the summer. But just a couple of days ago, I was on the phone to a promoter in Germany, for example, and it's very clear that things at the end of the year, November, December, are very, very precarious still at this time. So we're discovering more, day by day, really.
Well, and the one thing I've heard, too, we had that one world concert, and Bill and Melinda Gates were on there, and they were talking about a vaccine possibly being ready for November. I don't see personally, as this has evolved over time, any comfort level with any human being on this planet until there's something that gives us an antibody that can prevent us from having any problems. Because in the beginning, I remember watching these doctors on TV say, well, if you get it, then you're immune and you can't get it again. But now they're saying that's not the case, so it's a bit of double jeopardy,
That's it. Yeah, absolutely.
Which is just bizarre to think that, our body... and the one thing is, I know people in the wintertime here in the States had very similar symptoms. They were sick for a while. It wasn't the flu, but it was bad. Yep. And I got to believe that if that's the case, a lot of people were already infected then, and if everybody got better, they would have developed antibodies. And that's kind of the script that Sweden was playing off of when they didn't do a lockdown. Let people have some level of exposure so they can develop an immunity to it. So, but who knows what the right answer is?
Exactly. That seems to be what's so tricky, is that we just don't know, do we? I exactly as you say, I know plenty of people over here who had similar symptoms before we should have done according to the official version, but who knows, because I suppose in some respects they are fairly generic symptoms, but it's just very difficult to know.
Yeah, indeed. Well, the one thing about you that's I guess kind of bittersweet is that you've released Shards and Constellations, and you're doing it during a time where people can get this music and they have the latitude to listen to music more, but you're not able to back it up live. How does this feel for you?
It's a mixed blessing in some ways. I mean, distribution is a different thing than it used to be, and so yeah, as you say, I'm very happy that people get to hear the music. And in fact, our first live concerts wouldn't be until August. In theory, they still exist. So in theory, they haven't been cancelled. I don't necessarily hold out much hope that we'll be able to play in August. But so it's mixed. It's bittersweet because it's we're very fortunate that these days for the word to get out there without playing live. One extra spin on this, of course, is that as a non-American, it's just extremely difficult for me to come and play in the States anyway. So as far as gigs with Tamika in the States would go, the situation isn't much worse than it would have been otherwise. I have actually lost a few concerts in the States due to this virus, but it's very difficult for us to come and perform in America anyway.
So talk to me a little bit about your beginnings, kind of where you were born and raised and how jazz became your future.
Sure. I was born actually only a couple of miles down the road from where I'm speaking to you now. So I was born and raised in Oxford, and neither of my parents is a musician, but both are real music lovers, and so I was one of these very fortunate people to grow up in a musical household. My second earliest memory, my earliest memory is actually, my first memory is of getting lost in a shopping mall in Austin, Texas, because when I was very, very little, I lived in Austin for just 6 months. But my second earliest memory is actually of hearing the Duke Ellington tune Saturday Night Function at home. My dad being a huge Ellington fan, and it really rubbed off from there. But I grew up not only with jazz on in the house, but with classical music. And so when my instrumental tuition first began, I guess I would have been 6 years old, and that was really orthodox classical piano. And Oxford is a big music town, so I was very, very lucky to have some great teachers. And I learned piano for about 4 years, and then at the age of 10 also took up the church organ. So that's the part of my experience, I suppose, which then peels off later towards playing the Hammond organ and occasional concerts still on the church organ, although it's very rare. But yeah, so I was very lucky to come up in a musical household, and it really snowballed from there.
Now that we're in quarantine and you have all these jazz memories on stage and with other performers, what memories are you kind of holding on to right now that are giving you strength in this time of no live jazz?
That's a really great question. On the one hand, I think it's important for us to be unsentimental about the situation. I suppose for me, the most exciting jazz has always thrived on this kind of lack of sentimentality. So it's important, I suppose, to look forward, to try to seize it as an opportunity. So to write, to practice, and so forth. That said, of course, I miss the human interaction. I miss playing in front of an audience and so forth. I try not to think of that, to sort of scratch that itch, as it were. I've always been an absolutely compulsive listener, so I have a large collection of music here, and of course nowadays it's easy to get things digitally too. So I just listen a lot too. Trying to take the whole thing as an opportunity. So I just spend a lot of time with my music collection, when I'm not actually composing or practicing.
So what do you like the best about being a musician?
That's a tricky question. On the one hand, it's we're very lucky in that we get to, our job and our passion are the same thing. So it's something very fundamental. So in a sense, if it's not corny to say, I sort of love everything about it. I can tell you what I don't miss. I don't necessarily miss all the traveling. I love to go places and I love being in these places, but the endless airports and stuff are a bit of a drag. But I miss the interaction, the sense of communication with an audience. I miss. We're in this very privileged position where, as well as being musicians, we're also music lovers. And I know that when I go to a concert, it's the highlight of my day, week, month, whatever. And so I miss being able to be part. And then, of course, it's important, I suppose, not to underestimate the very practical side of it. It is our living, in a sense. And so at times like this, it's tough because we're not able to work, and that puts on various financial pressures, of course.
I guess that's the thing, too, that I've realized of all of this. I understand how difficult that is, but the one thing I think about with the rebound of everybody is that jazz is not necessarily an art form that people get into for the money. And I've seen so much passion that goes into this art form, and at the end of the day, jazz is improv, and what we're living through now is like the highest level of improv.
Right. I think that's a totally fascinating way to think about it. And absolutely, I totally agree. Yeah.
So, we're going to get to the end of this, and we're going to get back into the audience, and you're going to get back on stage. What do you hope both musician and the crowd realizes from this absence away from live music?
Yeah, that's tricky. I mean, in a sense, I think we're already realizing how much we all miss it. I hope musicians, I hope that we realize how privileged we are. I really, and one of my pet hates is musicians moaning about how tough we have it. I mean, yes, we have it tough, but there's hard work and there's hard work, and we're not down a mine. We're not in a hospital fighting this thing on the front line. So I hope that musicians actually gain a sense of perspective too. That would be one thing. But I also hope, for example, that this inability to travel, maybe this helps us think about how we can rationalize our conduct more broadly. I mean, for example, one of the things is for all our for example, the typical political or environmental leanings of musicians, we have horrendous carbon footprints, for example. And so maybe this time away from performing is helping us think and reflect on actually how we could perhaps structure our careers differently so as not to be so damaging on an environmental level. And, things like this. So I think it's trying to look forward, trying to find the opportunity in the situation.
It's interesting. Coldplay had announced, they had this new album, Everyday Life, that came out at the beginning of the year, and they announced that they're not going to do a tour until they can figure out a way to not put such a carbon imprint out there. And I don't think that, now everything's different, but they weren't going to do it because of that specifically. So I find that notion very interesting. So
absolutely, yeah.
I
feel it's quite nuanced as well, because of course, Coldplay can do that. That is easy for Coldplay because the millions they have in the bank. I mean, one argument, I suppose, is that for us to travel as musicians, it's better than the audience coming to us, for instance. So it's quite a nuanced thing, but absolutely, I saw that Coldplay story, and it was interesting.
Yeah, without a doubt. So, why do you love jazz?
Oh wow, it's a music that I came to love from such a young age. I find it difficult to pinpoint because it's just part of the fabric of, I suppose, who I am at this point. I love the freedom. But that's not all I love, because I'm a huge... Classical music is also a huge part of my life, and the discipline is also of music is also something which attracts me. I see that in the music of Bach, for example. But also, that's not alien to the jazz context. I mean, when you think of, the Ellington Band is one of my greatest loves. I mean, the discipline of that is extraordinary, and Sun Ra was explicit on the discipline thing. So, the freedom is part of it. I think one of the things that's interesting to me is that improvisation is a process whereby people from very different backgrounds, who maybe share no verbal language at all, it's a process by which we can do something together. So it feels like an important model for social, solidarity and community. I can, as somebody with a background in jazz improvisation, I can play with a musician from Ethiopia, with a musician from Korea, with a musician from Australia, and so on and so forth. So I value the process because it's a way of making the world smaller, but at the same time appreciating all the amazing differences we see. And it's a trite answer, but I just love the sound of it. If I could only ever hear one sound again, it may be those birds outside my window at the moment, which is one of the amazing things this lockdown. But it may also just be I might just listen to Sonny Rollins. So it's just something which resonates with me.
Well, I got a quick Sonny Rollins story. You may appreciate this. Speaking of him, I was interviewing somebody a few weeks ago, and they had told me that one of the things in America that kind of somewhat had the magnitude of what's going on now is 9/11. And a few days after that, a reporter was at Ground Zero doing an interview, and there was somebody in the background playing the saxophone. And this musician was watching it, and he was like, "That's Sonny Rollins." And the interviewer didn't know, and was just interviewing somebody else, and then finally goes over to Sonny and starts talking, has no idea who he is, and Sonny doesn't say who he is, and he's just like, "I'm just playing for the first responders," and they just went on their way. And he was just sitting there like, how did they not know that that's the most famous jazz musician alive on the planet today?
Right. Yeah, exactly.
So it was pretty cool. That was a great story. And
that's fantastic.
Yeah, and those are kind of the anecdotes that I've been picking up over this time. I mean, the jazz musicians are already very raw, grounded, humble humans, and this has only kind of opened up a door a little bit more, which has been fascinating. But my final question to you is this, and it's, everyone has a version or an interpretation of you, your family, your friends, your fans, but you're the one living your life. Who do you think you are?
In some respects, I try not to have a self-conception. I think I think from the outside in. I think my guiding principle is to be, to be honest and to have integrity, and then stay true to yourself, whether that's your musical voice or whether that's your integrity in dealing with other people, your manner towards other people. And I think maybe your identity is kind of an aggregate of all those actions in a sense. So I suppose I don't have a sense of myself from the outside in. I couldn't sort of sketch a portrait, but I guess I try to handle myself in a certain way and hope that adds up to a good thing as opposed to a bad thing, I suppose. Yeah.
Right on. That's a great answer. Hey, man, thank you for taking some time out for Neon Jazz today. Stay safe, and good luck with the new album.
Thank you so much. That's very kind of you.
Thanks for listening and tuning in to another Neon Jazz interview, where we give you a bit of insight into the finest cats in New Orleans, Kansas City, and spots all over the world, giving fans all that jazz. And thanks to Alexander for his time, music, and story. If you want to hear more interviews, go to Famous Interviews with Joe Domino in the iTunes Store. Visit Neon Jazz at youtube.com, and for everything Neon Jazz all the time, go to the neonjazz.blogspot.com. Until next time, enjoy the jazz, my friends.
Neon Jazz.